Hello friends, today we're going to be talking about Euphorbias. I figured it's time for me to share my tips and tricks on how I grow them in my home. Before we get into that though, I want to say if you're new here and you don't know me already, hi, my name is Emma and I make houseplanty content all over the internet. So if you want to follow along with my houseplanty journey and maybe learn something along the way, stick around, watch some more of my videos and subscribe to my channel. If you are not new here, welcome back. I really appreciate you returning. Now, let's get into the Euphorbia care. Starting off with a little bit of general information, Euphorbias, even though they definitely give off cactus vibes with these spikes that can be quite sharp, they're actually a succulent, not a cactus, which I didn't know before I got into my Euphorbias. And Euphorbias are actually an incredibly diverse genus with so many species. I think there's over like 2,000 or something like that, different species of Euphorbia. And so you can get a lot of different variety in there, a lot of which are grown mostly as outdoor plants. I'm going to be talking about these in terms of indoor plant care today, and I have 3 different types that I can show you. The first kind, the one that I am holding here, is a Euphorbia lactea, and this is the variegated or white ghost version. I've also got the non-variegated version here as well. This little guy is my Euphorbia trigona, but this one is a variegated one, which is quite fun. And then finally, we have the Euphorbia ingens. Again, this is a variegated one. I really love my variegated Euphorbias, if you couldn't tell. And I give these basically all the same care. They're fairly low maintenance plants, and I have found that they can be quite fast growing as well. This one in particular I got last May, and it was literally this tall. And then within the few months of growing season after that, it had doubled in size and gotten to this big, which I think is really, really incredible. So that just goes to show that if you're giving them the right care, they can grow incredibly quickly. Light is probably the most important factor for your Euphorbias. They need quite a lot of bright light, and I'm talking direct light indoors. If you have a south-facing window that gets light a good chunk of the day, these will love that. Here in the UK, I don't quite think it's bright enough in my windows to get these growing as fast as they have been. And so I pretty much exclusively grow these under grow lights, and they just lap up that light. They love having it, and it has allowed these to grow so much in the time I've had them. The only one that I don't have growing under grow lights is my Euphorbia ingens here, and that is actually intentional. It is quite a large plant, and so I don't have tons of room for a big like succulent with spikes out in my house with my 2 cats. I don't want them rubbing up against these plants all that often because it could scratch them. So it's living in my northwest facing kitchen window, which is not the ideal light for it. I knew that putting it there, and I basically wanted to stop/stunt its growth a little bit until I can find a better place for it to live. You can see that little bit of growth at the top is much, much smaller than the rest of the plant, and that is the growth that it has grown in the year or so I've had it in that window. And I'm not mad at that. I knew that was gonna happen. But basically, if you aren't giving your Euphorbias enough light, they can grow a whole heck of a lot slower and smaller and atoliate and grow like really leggy, which is not ideal growth for them, and it's probably not what you're gonna want. So if you possibly can, give these bright light, whether it's grow lights or bright sun, please do it. Your plants will absolutely thank you. Watering is the next most important thing for you Euphorbias. They are extremely drought tolerant. They are succulent after all. They've got these big succulent branches that hold water throughout the plant, and so they are not going to be watered nearly as much as like an aroid or a lot of the other houseplants you might have in your home. They actually prefer to stay on the drier side. I think on average I water my Euphorbias about once a month. It's probably a little bit more often, maybe like once every 3 weeks in the spring and summer, the growing season, when it's warmer and these things are actively growing a little bit more. And then I might drop it down to every 5 or 6 weeks in the winter time because they aren't growing as much, given since I have them under grow lights, they are still using that water and still growing, so the variation doesn't change all that much. But I do not water these all that often. I let their soil dry out completely before watering again. I check it either with my finger, looking at the clear pots or going in with a moisture meter. When they are ready for a drink, I give them an extremely thorough watering. Like, I want to get the entire soil block fully saturated to the point where it's dripping out the bottom, because you want the soil to be fully hydrated. But then after it's hydrated, if there's any extra water at the bottom, I dump that out because you don't want it sitting in water. These are not going to tolerate having their feet wet sitting in a puddle of water. They're not going to enjoy that very much, and so avoid that if you possibly can, or you could risk rotting your Euphorbias. It's probably no surprise that Euphorbias love the warmth. Their ideal temperature range is between 18 and 29 degrees Celsius or 65 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. In general, your home should be okay for them. So if you want to pop your Euphorbia outside for the spring and summer months, maybe don't put it in direct sunlight because it might burn it, but getting dappled sunlight here and there, it would absolutely love that. Just be sure to bring it back in before temperatures drop to like 10 Celsius or 50 Fahrenheit at night, because they will not tolerate lower than that. They're also not a big fan of drafts, so if you've got it in a sunny window, ideally make sure it's not a drafty window and it's not getting like huge fluctuations in temperature, because it's not going to like that very much either. Average home humidity should be fine for your Euphorbias. Like 30 to 50% would be their ideal. They don't want it to be too humid, but honestly, my home is around 50-60% most of the time because I have a lot of tropical plants and they don't seem to mind too much. Given most of these I do have in a room that has the fewest number of plants in it, and it's also where we dry our laundry, so there's a dehumidifier running in that room quite frequently so we don't get mold in our flat. And so that room might be a little bit lower humidity than the rest of the house, but even still it's probably about 50%, and that seems to be okay for them. Fertilizing wise, I think I probably fertilize my Euphorbias maybe every other watering or so. In my home, because these are under grow lights and it's nice and warm in here, they're gonna continue growing for most of the year. They might grow a little bit more in the summer than they do in the wintertime, but they live in an artificial environment, and so I continue fertilizing all year round because they are still putting out new growth. If you find that your Euphorbias slow down or stop growing in the winter, that's completely normal. Just maybe don't feed them for a couple months until it gets warmer and brighter again. And I always use a houseplant focused fertilizer for them. I've used things like liquid gold leaf or Formulex or Nurture System #1. All of those options work perfectly well for them, and they haven't seemed to complain one bit about it. Having a nice well-draining soil is really important for Euphorbias. They like, ideally, a cactus and succulent mix. No surprise, they are a succulent. That's what I have a majority of them in. I've not repotted these, they're just in the soil they came in, but I probably will fairly soon because I prefer it. I find cactus and succulent mix doesn't hold on to moisture as much as sort of average houseplant soil does. So if you're making your own soil, like pop some sand and grit in it, because those are really, really well draining. You don't want to have things like vermiculite in there, which are going to hold on to water and cause your plant's roots to stay a little bit too wet. I personally really like having these in clear pots because you can see the sort of soil dryness in here. It makes it a lot easier to determine whether or not your plant needs the water. And Euphorbias don't have a massive root system compared to their size. You can see the like plant to pot ratio is quite small, and so they're not going to need repotting all that often, and they actually like staying a little bit more pot bound, so you might not have to repot your Euphorbia for a couple of years depending on how fast it's growing. And if in doubt, I would personally stay on the smaller side as opposed to going bigger, unless you have found that your plant is getting extremely top heavy. As you can see, a lot of the weight on this one is up top. And so if I'm finding that it is prone to tipping, I might pot up into a wider pot in order to give the plant a little bit more weight down the bottom. Also, the like nice gritty soil is on the heavier side. And so having more soil like that could help hold the plant down and weight it so it doesn't tip over as easily. Propagating Euphorbias is super easy, especially with the sort of branching varieties like this. All you need to do is take a clean, sharp knife and chop off one of the branches, or I guess with this one you would just... But I'm a little bit nervous to do that with this one. I'd much prefer to stick to propagating the branching Euphorbias. Quick note, Euphorbia sap is toxic and a serious irritant, so always wear gloves when you're handling it and keep it away from your eyes and out of reach of pets and children. And before you pot that into anything, you want to let that wound callus over for probably at least a couple weeks. You really want that wound to dry out fully, because if it goes into the soil wet, it could rot and die. So you want to let that wound fully callus over before popping it into substrate. That's actually what I did with a propagation of this one. A little piece snapped off, and I think I just left that on the side callusing for maybe like a month or so before I popped it into the soil of the plant. You can just stick it straight into the soil and it will root in that. Ideally, you want to be keeping your propagations in a warm environment, but because these plants already live in a warm environment, I didn't need to do anything else to give it that extra warmth. You could pop it on a heat mat or something if you really wanted to like get it to root faster, but you definitely don't need to do that. So there we go. That is everything I do to take care of my euphorbias to keep them growing happy and healthy and strong. I really hope you found this video informative. If you maybe just got yourself your first euphorbia or you're contemplating buying one, I hope this helped you decide whether or not it's a good plant for you. I freaking love these plants. They're so chill and easy. Now that I've got the care down on them, it's pretty simple. So if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up down below and leave a comment on other houseplanty things you'd like me to talk about in the future, and subscribe for more. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to keep growing. Bye!